Poštovana dekanesa Jasmina Selimović, gospodine Steven Glazer, poštovani govornici, izlagači, kolegice i kolege, dame i gospodo. Zadovoljstvo mi je poželjeti vam dobrodošlicu na prvu konferenciju iz oblasti forenzičnog računovodstva u Bosni i Hercegovini pod nazivom Trendovi i izazovi u borbi protiv prevara i privrednog kriminala. Konferenciju je organizovao Centar za forenzično računovodstvo Ekonomskog fakulteta Univerziteta u Sarajevu u okviru projekta Jačanje kapaciteta forenzičnog računovodstva u Bosni i Hercegovini, finansiranog od strane Ambasade Sjedinjenih Američkih Država u Bosni i Hercegovini. Ja sam Lejla Sinanović, voditelj konferencije. Danas je poseban dan za naš fakultet iz još jednog razloga. Naime, 14. oktobar je dan kada je prije 69 godina osnovan Ekonomski fakultet u Sarajevu. Mnogo truda i rada proteklih godina uloženo je od strane uprava i zaposlenika našeg fakulteta da bismo danas, između ostalog, na ovom nivou mogli organizirati prvu konferenciju iz forenzičnog računovodstva. Zato vam s ponosom najavljujem prvu ženu ove institucije, dekanesu Jasminu Selimović, koja će konferenciju zvanično i otvoriti. Izvolite, dekanesa.
Lejla, hvala lijepo. Srdačan pozdrav svim prisutnim učesnicima konferencije, mojim kolegicama i kolegama s fakulteta, ali i ovima koji dolaze iz drugih institucija. Meni je zaista velika čast i zadovoljstvo, prije svega da sam na čelu fakulteta koji danas slavi 69 godina, koji je koju godinu stariji od Univerziteta u Sarajevu. Iduće godine ulazimo u 8. deceniju svog postojanja, a ja se nadam da će uslovi dozvoliti da se to adekvatno i obilježi i da ćete svi vi svojim prisustvom i na konferenciji, ali i na našim studijima dati svoj doprinos tim procesima. Ekonomski fakultet u Sarajevu je i dosad pokušavao da u određenim stvarima bude pionir. U onoj mjeri u kojoj smo mi mogli, mislim da smo u tome i uspijevali, od međunarodne prepoznatljivosti, studija učenja na daljinu, razvijanja pojedinih profesija, studija na engleskom jeziku, tako smo došli i do ovoga. Zahvaljujući aplikaciji za projekat izgradnje kapaciteta forenzičnog računovodstva u Bosni i Hercegovini, koji je finansiran od strane Američke ambasade u Bosni i Hercegovini, Ekonomski fakultet je zajedno sa Savezom za računovodstvo, reviziju Federacije Bosne i Hercegovine, kao našim partnerom na projektu, dobio priliku da učestvuje u razvijanju, odnosno uspostavljanju i razvijanju profesije forenzični računovođa. Želeći da budemo u korak sa modernim trendovima i sa onome što se radi u svijetu iz ove oblasti, mi smo se javili institucijama koje su u svijetu etablirani, priznate kao institucije koje su vodeće iz ove oblasti. Danas ćete o tome čuti, ja naravno neću sad ulaziti u detalje, ali hoću da kažem da u ovom poslu pokušavamo da budemo profesionalci, pokušavamo da profesiju razvijemo u skladu sa onim što je najbolje trenutno u svijetu, pokušavamo da se odmaknemo od nekih polovičnih rješenja, nego već kad nešto radimo, da to zaista uradimo na zadovoljstvo svih onih koji će sutra ovo časno i važno zvanje i ponijeti. Mi smo kao dio tog projekta uspostavili smo i studij zajedno u saradnji sa našim kolegama sa Ekonomskog fakulteta u Banja Luci, sa čijim nastavnicima ćemo mi u ovoj godini izvoditi nastavu na magistarskom studiju za sticanje zvanja magistar forenzičnog računovodstva. Naravno, krenut ćemo u pregovore sa Komisijom za računovodstvo i reviziju, gdje ćemo pokušati da na državnom nivou odnosno dogovorimo stvari i predstavimo ono što su rezultati našeg rada do sada. Ova konferencija jeste jedan od pomaka na tom putu, jedna od naših aktivnosti koje realiziramo na tom putu. Ja se zahvaljujem svima koji su učestvovali u organizaciji konferencije, svima koji će svojim radovima i prezentacijama doprinijeti da se ovdje danas čuju i da se govori o vrlo važnim stvarima za ovu profesiju u Bosni i Hercegovini. Svi znamo u kakvom stanju je pravosudni sistem i sve ostale institucije koje su zainteresirane za oblast forenzičnog računovodstva, koja je zaista jako važna u borbi protiv privrednog kriminala, u detekciji prevara i u borbi protiv takvih dešavanja. Ja se nadam da će ovaj cijenjeni skup danas u velikoj mjeri pomoći da dođemo do dobrih zaključaka koji ćemo predstaviti i finansijerima projekta, ali i svim ostalim zainteresiranim stranama. Hvala svima koji su pomogli da se konferencija organizira, svima koji će danas ovdje govoriti. Posebno hvala našim partnerima iz Saveza federacije, Saveza za računovodstvo i reviziju federacije i hvala Američkoj ambasadi koja cijelo vrijeme daje nesebičnu podršku u realizaciji ovog projekta. Ja ću konferenciju otvoriti i zaželjeti vam uspješan rad. Hvala vam lijepo.
Hvala dekanesa. Ovom prilikom, evo i u moje ime i ime institucije, zahvaljujemo Američkoj ambasadi i predstavnici ambasade su danas sa nama. Direktor Ureda za međunarodnu borbu protiv narkotika i provedbu zakona vlade SAD-a pri ambasadi SAD-a u Bosni i Hercegovini je s nama, ali ima tehničkih poteškoća, pa ću zamoliti kolegicu Lejlu, njegovu asistenticu, da nam se obrati u ime gospodina Glazera.
Dobar dan svima. Mi se izvinjavamo radi tehničkih problema koje imamo. Stevena sluša, ali nije u mogućnosti da se konektuje i mikrofone, tako da ću ja predstavljati NL i Američku ambasadu u ovom slučaju, a i radim sa vama vrlo blisko na ovom projektu. Izuzetna mi je čast biti ovdje sa vama i stvarno želim prvo da iskoristim priliku da pozdravim dekanesu Jasminu Salimović i da vam čestitam dan fakulteta, velika stvar i drago mi je da sam u mogućnosti sa vama da budem ovdje povodom tog dana. Biro za međunarodnu trgovinu narkoticima i provođenje zakonom je odjel State Departmenta koji podržava provođenje zakona i partnere u oblasti vladavine zakona. I već više od 2 decenije mi i ostatak vlade Sjedinjenih Američkih Država smo posvećeni podršci efikasnom provođenju zakona i vladavine zakona u Bosni i Hercegovini, što je u stvari slučaj i danas ovdje. I kao dio ove obaveze mi smo posvećeni podržavanju razvoju vještina, sposobnosti i infrastrukture radi učinkovitog sprečavanja, prepoznavanja i borbe protiv prevara, finansijskih zločina i korupcije ovdje u Bosni i Hercegovini. Nažalost, vi ovdje prisutni danas znate možda čak i bolje od mene da je korupcija u Bosni i Hercegovini izuzetno ozbiljno pitanje. I Sjedinjene Američke Države su posvećene prosperitetnoj, sigurnoj budućnosti za građane Bosne i Hercegovine. Međutim, da bi to sve mi postigli, treba se dosta raditi na polju sprječavanja korupcije i finansijskog kriminala i naravno otkrivanju kada se dogodi taj kriminal. I trebamo da preokrenemo trend koji će ljude pozivati da ostanu u ovoj državi, a ne da nas mladi napuštaju. I naš centar, znači Centar za forenzičko računovodstvo koji organizuje ovu konferenciju je pravi korak i dobar korak u pravom smjeru da to uspijemo. INL i Američka ambasada podržavamo ekonomski fakultet u podršci ovom centru, u podršci uspostavljanju magistarskog programa iz forenzičkog računovodstva. I mi smo tu i dalje da vas podržavamo i da zajedno radimo. Mislim da nema potrebe na ovom skupu da govorim koliki je značaj forenzičkog računovodstva u sprečavanju, identifikaciji korupcije i kako je bitan sav rad koji vi sada trenutno sa ekonomskog fakulteta radite. Mislim da će to ukratko biti od mene. Tu sam za sva pitanja i za sve vas i još jedno veliko čestitam vam na danu fakulteta.
Hvala vam, gospođo Ptašević. Prije nego što pređemo na prvu sesiju, ukratko ću vas informisati o dinamici rada konferencije. Kao što ste mogli vidjeti u agendi, konferencija je koncipirana u 3 dijela. U prvoj sesiji slušat ćemo obraćanje 3 glavna govornika sa međunarodne scene, a zatim u drugoj sesiji imamo izlaganja domaćih i regionalnih stručnjaka. U trećoj sesiji imamo izlaganje radova učesnika konferencije. Zbog velikog broja radnih obaveza i nemogućnosti da nam se pridruže u realnom vremenu, glavni govornici su snimili svoja izlaganja samo za potrebe naše konferencije i ovim putem im se zahvaljujemo na dobroj volji i izdvojenom vremenu. Zvanični jezik konferencije su lokalni BHS jezici, ali su govori glavnih govornika snimljeni naravno na engleskom jeziku. Ukoliko predavanja želite pratiti na engleskom jeziku, ostanite u ovoj sesiji. Međutim, ukoliko želite pratiti predavanja sa simultanim prevodom, možete iznad spiska učesnika na vašem ekranu kliknuti Breakout Rooms te se pridružiti u sobi broj 1, tako što ćete kliknuti pored room 1 Join Room, kao što možete vidjeti na ekranu. Oni koji izaberu da slušaju predavanja sa simultanim prevodom, po završetku će se automatski vratiti u glavnu sobu. Potrebno je da to uradite za svaku prezentaciju u prvoj sesiji. I još jedna napomena, vrijeme za pitanja ćemo imati na kraju konferencije, dakle na kraju treće sesije, obzirom da smo ograničeni vremenom i isplaniranim dakle, periodima za odvojene sesije. Najprije ćemo poslušati izlaganje Paula Thompsona, direktora Evropske federacije za računovođe i revizore za srednja i mala preduzeća. Gospodin Thompson je ekspert za praktičnu primjenu međunarodnih računovodstvenih standarda, kreiranje računovodstvenih politika i propisa, promovisanje, zagovaranje i obrazovanje u oblasti računovodstva. Izdao je brojne publikacije na temu korporativnog upravljanja i konsolidovanog izvještavanja, te o praksi i budućnosti računovodstvene profesije. Paul Thompson će nam govoriti u narednim minutama, će nam govoriti o temi Uloga i regulative računovodstvene i revizorske profesije u EU u domenu borbe protiv pronevjera i finansijskog kriminala, sa osvrtom na globalnu regulativu.
It's a real pleasure to be able to present to all of you today, and what I want to do is just to say a few opening remarks in relation to the role of the global accountancy profession in fighting financial crime. And during the course of my short presentation, I wish to cover basically three things. I want to talk about the changing or evolving role of professional accountants. I want to introduce you to the key points of the World Economic Forum's unifying framework. And third and finally, I want to talk a little bit about how professional accountants can help clients combat cyber risk. So let me get started with the first of those three items that I want to cover today, and that is the changing role of professional accountants. What we've witnessed in recent years, and to a large extent it's been accelerated by the COVID-19 global pandemic and the way in which businesses had to kind of adjust its way of working and respond to this pandemic, we've seen a growth in financial crime and a growth in cyber risk the businesses are exposed to. There's a lot of evidence to support these developments. And at the same time, what we are witnessing is increased expectations that accountants will play a more active role in helping to fight and combat financial crime and to help mitigate cyber risk. And this increased expectation of a more active role, by more active role we mean as one of three things. It can be as gatekeepers, trying to keep financial crime at bay and out of the organization, trying to address cyber risk. Secondly, as advisors, advising clients and the businesses that they work for on how to combat financial crime and limit cyber risk and address cyber risk when there's some security breach. And third and finally, there's an expectation that accountants provide assurance on and around financial crime and cyber risk. And this can, for example, take the form of assurance on systems being resilient enough to be able to combat financial crime. The second item that I want to address to you today is the World Economic Forum's unifying framework. Back in June 2021, so barely a few months ago now, the World Economic Forum published the role and responsibilities of gatekeepers in the fight against illicit financial flows, a unifying framework. Now, this unifying framework, the WEF, describes as being a value-based, self-regulatory framework for private sector intermediaries that was strategically positioned to prevent or interrupt illicit financial flows. And these persons, these private sector intermediaries, are collectively referred to as gatekeepers, and hence that gives the name to the paper. The unifying framework's predicated on three key principles, that of integrity, transparency, and accountability. And the framework sets out 5 general practices to be implemented, and they are as follows. Firstly, to establish clear, concise, and up-to-date policies in terms of fighting illicit financial flows. Secondly, to promote effective due diligence by businesses, due diligence that will ensure that they are resilient to these illicit financial flows. Thirdly, to create a culture of integrity through training and other incentives. Fourthly, is to foster a culture where one is willing and able to speak out, speak up. There's a lot that's been said about gatekeepers as not actually blowing the whistle when they spot something. They just stay quiet about it and they don't speak out, speak up. And fifth and finally, in terms of practices, is to collaborate across industries and across sectors, and together we can tackle these illicit financial flows more effectively. Now, you might be wondering, what do we mean by gatekeepers? Well, gatekeepers are, as I mentioned, they are private sector intermediaries who are strategically positioned to prevent or interrupt illicit financial flows. Now, these gatekeepers are named as being accountants, art advisors, bankers, corporate service providers, lawyers, and there's a whole lot of other strategically placed intermediaries who are named in this unifying framework. But obviously, most significantly for us is the fact that accountants are singled out as being one of the more important gatekeepers, a gatekeeping profession. Let me just dwell on a few responses that we've heard from the International Federation of Accountants, which is an organization that I used to work for, and IFAC is the global spokesperson for the profession. It's been very active in this space for a number of years. Now, IFAC's response is quite interesting. They pushed out a press release, and I just want to highlight some of the key points that they made. Firstly, they felt that the unifying framework provided added visibility in the fight against financial crime from a cross-sectoral perspective. The important thing being multi-sectors, and that was the perspective being presented. And I quote for you a few other things that IFAC said in this response. They felt that it was a significant step in raising awareness about the good work of gatekeepers, such as accountants, who work to prevent or interrupt financial crime, and particularly money laundering, illicit financial flows, and corruption. Now, IFAC mentioned that they hope to inspire other gatekeeping professions to adopt an ethical framework on a par or equivalent with the International Ethics Standards Board for Accountants International Code of Ethics for Professional Accountants. In brief, the IESBA Code. This IESBA Code has been in existence for a number of years, and over the recent few years, it's been made more robust, especially with regard to the profession's role in combating financial crime and illicit financial flows. The chief executive of IFAC, Kevin Dancy, applauded the report. He said this new report is broadly aligned with the long-standing principles of the IASB code, and this code governs the conduct of approximately 3 million professional accountants. And IFAC encourages other gatekeeper professions across all sectors to look to the code as a model to emulate and replicate as appropriate. The third and final thing that I want to cover today is the role of professional accountants in helping clients combat cyber risk. Recently, the Journal of Accountancy, which is the professional magazine that's available online, published by the American Institute of CPA, which is the world's largest professional accountancy body, they very recently published 2 articles on helping clients, on how professional accountants can help clients prepare for and recover from cyber attacks. What these articles highlights is the fact that IT, information technology, brings many benefits to businesses, but it also brings with it increased risks and costs of fraud. The articles mention that only 26% of organizations have an enterprise-wide cybersecurity incident response plan. And this is according to the IBM's 2020 Cyber Resilient Organization report. Now, this is despite half of them, more than half of those organizations, having had at least one cyber attack in the previous 2 years that caused significant disruption. This is a very interesting finding that despite being significantly disrupted, they're not trying to plan for how to reduce the risk of a recurrence. Now, as the risk of cyber fraud increases, accountants are positioned to help their clients and employers prepare for possible cyber attack. And I can cite 2 ways in which they can do that. Firstly, through risk assessment, in helping clients assess their risk. And risk assessment is an essential part of fraud prevention and detection. It's far better to be invested in the prevention of fraud rather than have to focus so much on how to detect it and then deal with it. Secondly, practitioners can work with clients to ensure cybersecurity processes go above and beyond compliance requirements and deliver adequate protection. So as you can see, professional accountants stand to play a very important role in helping clients combat cyber risk. And that concludes what I wanted to speak to on this subject today. I do hope that in the foreseeable future, we get to meet in person and I can get to speak and meet with many of you that are listening in today. Thank you very much for listening.
Evo, sačekali smo malo da se svi učesnici vrate u glavnu sobu. Ovim putem zahvaljujemo gospodinu Thompsonu na njegovom obraćanju i izlaganju. Drugi govornik je Richard Parlor, direktor Centra za međunarodno pravo finansijskih tržišta. Gospodin Parlor aktivno učestvuje u regulisanju propisa kada je riječ o usklađenosti propisa, novim proizvodima i uslugama, crowdfundingu, kriptovalutama, Brexitu, pranju novca, korupciji, prevarama, kibernetičkom kriminalu, finansijskom kriminalu, sudskim vještacima i korporativnom upravljanju. Bavi se uvođenjem novih brzih tehnika učenja na finansijskim tržištima kako bi obuka bila zanimljiva i efikasna. Richard Parlor će govoriti o temi. Izvještaj radne grupe EU o unapređenju efektivnosti suzbijanja pranja novca u Evropi. Osvrt na integritet na planetarnom nivou i teracidno finansiranje. U narednih nekoliko minuta poslušajmo obraćanje gospodina Richarda Parlora.
Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for coming today. I am going to introduce a new subject, part of the financial crime agenda worldwide, and this is an idea called anti-terroricide financing. So this is looking at the planet agenda and all the things that are killing the planet, and then working out what the crime element to it is, so that we can bring to bear on it law enforcement and all the things that we are doing in anti-money laundering. So it's a bit like aligning those two different programs. So what I wanted to talk about this morning is, first of all, terroricide. What is it? What do we mean by that? Then refocusing the anti-financial crime agenda. What tools have we already got available? And what are the new tools that we might need to create? So terroricide. What I've done here is to break down the issues into 10 elements. So first of all, we have climate change. I think everybody knows about climate change and the COP26, which will happen in Glasgow in November of this year, 2021. But a lot of people seem to think that if we get the temperature rise just and limit it to 1.5 degrees centigrade, then that will be the problem will be solved and we can carry on as normal. We are forgetting that there are 9 other key issues which are equally important. So even if we do manage to get to 1.5 degrees centigrade, there are lots of other things that we need to be very careful about. So on the screen here, don't forget there is biodiversity loss. This week actually there is COP15 in Kunming in China, which is looking at that particular issue, but doesn't have the same amount of interest that COP26 in Glasgow has been given. Our oceans are very important. There is a lot of ocean degradation going on. We are slowly destroying certain parts of the ocean, and that's very key. Soil is another area which is very important, and that also leads into desertification. So we see things like the Sahara Desert moving southwards. Deforestation, we are losing lots of trees every minute. That's not good for the planet either. Pollution, we probably know about things like air pollution, about plastic pollution, but this also covers light pollution and noise pollution, which is also having a bad impact on the planet. There is a population explosion predicted in certain countries. In other countries, the population will decrease quite substantially by the end of this century. So there's a lot of change happening. And then of course, none of us can survive without water. And that is a very, very important issue. And then finally, we do need to watch out what we are doing with resources, and not just plundering those resources and sometimes wasting a lot of the resources which we take from the earth, but also the wastage, and particularly in the food sector. So let's look at those quickly one by one. And I will not go into huge amounts of detail here, but just point out the key elements so that you can get an idea of what I'm talking about. There is a lot of research behind all of these elements and a lot more that we could go into, but this is just an introduction today. So climate change, we are moving towards net zero and limiting the temperature rise to 1.5 degrees centigrade if we can. Some people are still denying that there is climate change. I think the graph, 5, 6 different approaches to what has been happening with temperature. All of them are, as you will see, are pointing in the right direction, in the same direction rather. What does that mean in terms of the financial sector and crime maybe? Well, when we look at the idea to limit it to 1.5 degrees centigrade, 4 out of 7 of the stock indices of the G7 countries, which include the UK's FTSE 100 and the US S&P 500, those are all on a pathway of 3 degrees centigrade at the moment. So we might need to start introducing restrictions on what we invest in and monitor those, and maybe criminalize investment in things like coal, perhaps, to help stop the temperature increase. So we've got COP26 coming up, and if you want to read further, there is the IPCC report, which was released earlier this year. Biodiversity loss. You can see from the graph there how much wildlife has declined between 1970 and 2016. So that's quite a significant drop. And it's not just biodiversity, but it's the actual sort of biomass. So it's the populations of mammals, of birds, of fish, amphibians and reptiles. And we've lost 2/3 of those in the last 50 years. So that is a pretty significant decrease and not good for the planet. You can read more about it in the Dasgupta report, which was released earlier this year. Illegal wildlife trafficking, when we look to the financial crime element, illegal wildlife trafficking is now one of the top 5 crimes worldwide. There is a conference, as I mentioned, happening in Kunming in China over the 11th to 15th of October. And that follows on from another conservation conference which was held in September in Marseille in France. Another significant issue is ocean degradation. So this is the oceans getting worse and as a result of human action. We need to be very careful about this. 70% of our oxygen comes from oceans. The number of overfished fish stocks are up 3 times in the last 50 years. 1/3 of our assessed fisheries are beyond their biological limits. So, we need to take action here as well. Illegal fishing has become rife, and some of these super trawlers that we have these days just pick up everything within their nets and do not leave behind the other fish which we need to survive. So we need to be much more sophisticated in our approach. Here is another element which quite surprised me when I was doing my research. So soil degradation. You will see here that there is a map on the left-hand side, and all the red parts show very degraded soil. Lots of that soil is in Europe, and our big granary, if you like, for Europe in the Ukraine. The same in the prairies in the United States, the same in South America, the same in the Sahel in southern Africa, and an awful lot of soil degradation in South Asia and Southeast Asia as well. And only the only half decent sort of continent, if you like, which has not suffered as much as the rest is Australia. And even there, 55% of mineral depletion from the soils in the last 100 years. And what does that mean for us? Well, that means that the food that we eat only contains between 2 and 20% of the nutritional value that our ancestors would have had 100 years ago. Desertification, earlier about the Sahara Desert moving southwards. Well, that's not the only problem. You will see huge amounts of desertification happening in the western part of America, in Australia, and another huge area in Central Asia and the Middle East, where it's the soils and the aquifers underneath the soils far below just dry out. And that's a very real issue for us. There is no life on Earth without water. So desertification is something which we need to be very careful about. Deforestation is another big issue, and we are destroying, in essence, an area the size of Belgium every year. 31% of the land surface of the planet is covered by forests, but we are cutting down trees at the rate of 2,400 per minute. So an awful lot of trees would have been cut down by the time I finish this presentation. 50% of all our plant and land and animal species live in tropical forests. So if we want to maintain the biodiversity, if we want to maintain the plant diversity in order to be able to come up with new medicines and new vaccines, for example, we will need to preserve these forests. And there's a ratcheting up of the difficulties as well, as we have seen this year with wildfires, particularly in America, in Australia, around the Mediterranean. Those are increasing as a result of global warming. Pollution, lots of different kinds of pollution. Obviously, one side effect of the pandemic this year has been the improvement in air pollution in certain cities whilst lockdown happened. So you will see the picture there showing the centre of Delhi before the pandemic and afterwards in the middle of lockdown. You can actually see properly what city you are looking at, and you can breathe much cleaner air. But that's not all. In other terms of other pollution, we need to look at MRLs. Those are maximum residue levels in the food chain. And that's very important because the pesticides that we spray on the crops, we can't just wash them off because they will go into the ground and be sucked up by the plants, which give us the food that we eat. And those residue levels are at a level which is thought to be okay at the moment for certain aspects, but the European Union has decided that we really do need to halve those, and that creates lots of difficulties in the food chain where people have been using pesticides in a certain manner, and how do you change that so that we don't end up eating and drinking quite so much poisonous pesticides ourselves. We also need to be very careful about environmental infringements, and you can read about more of those in the European Union statements. And then finally, at the bottom of the screen there, we've seen some really nasty shipping accidents earlier this year with big spillages of chemicals which are not in the natural environment. And so we need to look at shipping standards as well, to make sure that all these chemicals are properly transported without the issues that we've had to face as a result of Express Pearl going down off Sri Lanka and MV Wakashio off Mauritius. Just a quick sign to give you a bit more of an idea. Plastic has become equivalent to the world's 5th largest climate heating country. A third of it is single use, less than 10% is recycled. 8 million tons of it ends up in the sea every year. And that breaks down into small bits, very, very small bits, microplastics, which fish eat and which then get back into the food chain. So it has been estimated that all of us on this seminar are eating a credit card's worth of plastic every week, whether we like it or not. Population increase. So here's a very interesting chart showing the ways in which certain countries' populations are going to change by the end of the century. So you'll see there that some populations are going to decrease. So China's population, for example, will halve, but Nigeria's population, on the other hand, is thought to probably increase by a factor of 4. Now that's raw population data. We need to factor in the consumption of all those people. So for example, the average American citizen consumes 7 times as much as the average Indian. So that means that in Indian terms, the effective consumer population of the United States is not its current population or its predicted population of about 350, 360 million. But that would have to be factored in by an amount of 7 times. And that brings us to an effective consumer population of 2.275 billion people in the United States. It's not quite as bad in other developed countries, but even in the UK, it's 5 times the average Indian that the average UK citizen consumes. And that's a similar number across Europe. Water is an absolutely crucial issue. So only 3% of the world's water is fresh water. Fresh water available per person has fallen 20% in the last 20 years. And the shortages affecting more than 3 billion people, with 60% of our agricultural cropland being highly water stressed. Because we're simply just taking too much out of the system, and the system cannot cope with our needs. In all, it has been estimated that at the moment we would need 1.6 planet Earths to keep us at a level that we are consuming at the moment, and that is unsustainable. And it's not just shortage of water, but it's the changes in the rainfall patterns as well. So not only have we seen record droughts this year, but also record floods. And my final one here on the 10 elements of terracide: resource plundering and wastage. There is a massive amount of illegal mining going on, and over mining as well. You'll see this is a copper mine, and this is what it has done to the countryside around that particular mine, with food wastage at 40%. So, I mean, that's just extraordinary. 40% of our food is just thrown away. Why are we putting so much effort into taking so much resource out of the planet and just throwing it away? Recycling rates are very, very low, and illegal dumping is very, very high, which sits around and creates more greenhouse gases and just worsens the effect. So, what does that mean in terms of the global financial crime agenda? Well, a lot of you will have been sitting there thinking, well, I can see some of those issues which have a financial crime impact, such as the illegal wildlife trafficking, even though the real impact of that is little known and little appreciated at the moment. So not all of those terracide issues have an immediately apparent financial crime angle. What does that mean? Well, maybe there are new areas for criminalization. Maybe we need to refocus our enforcement capability and spend more of that enforcement instead of perhaps on issues like romance fraud, which we're currently spending enforcement time on, and spend more of our time on combating illegal wildlife trafficking, for example. Do we need some new conventions? Do we need to really focus on the UN Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs? And at global level, do we need to revisit the Financial Action Task Force 40 recommendations and make sure that those are really focused on the key terracide issues which we face? We might need to have a look at certain other tools that we've got and refocus those. So our awareness and education, a lot of those issues which I've mentioned seem to be quite unknown to an awful lot of people. So there is a space to sit around and study some of this in more detail. There is a lot going on. There's a lot that you can read, and there are a lot of NGOs which are picking up this data, but it's in quite a fragmented manner at the moment, and it's difficult picking up all the information and quickly as well. We have laws and regulation and guidance in anti-money laundering, anti-financial crime, but we may need to refocus those. Sanctions are really important, but instead of putting sanctions in certain areas that we do at the moment, why not put sanctions on those who are doing illegal logging, for example? What about blacklisting certain companies from winning certain projects when they've clearly been taking money out of the system for their own purposes and not using them for example, just changing over to clean energy sources? What about our monitoring, our enforcement, and our international cooperation? Those are all very important elements. Another really important element is getting through some cultural change in the way that we behave. So perhaps not a criminal case there, but in terms of culture, if we can change our approach, we can also solve the problem there without having to get into the expensive areas of enforcement. It's not just tools that we have, but we might need to develop some new tools. So before we go ahead and launch a new railway project, a new roads project, perhaps we should be sitting there and doing what I've termed a planetary impact analysis. So what is the impact of that new road system going to be on the planet? Not just in terms of creation of CO2, but in terms of destruction of habitats for the other species we share this planet with along the way. What are going to be the long-term impacts of that? Is actually anybody really going to be using that road? What is the benefit and what is the cost, and not just the financial cost? Should we be developing lists of high terracide risk countries? So which are the countries which are really producing most pollution? Do we know that? Where are the problems really severe? What sectors? What companies? We need to get much more awareness of that. What about, as I indicated a bit earlier, planet-based 40 recommendations of the Financial Action Task Force? What about setting out our OKRs, our objectives and the key results along the way? Once we've got those objectives and what we think will be the key results, then we can set some key performance indicators to see that we are changing our culture, changing our behavior. What about rebalancing our spending? So, for example, the UK has recently announced £3 billion to go into a new nature fund, but you contrast that against £100 billion plus going into a new railway called HS2. Is that the kind of thing that we really ought to be doing? What about in the field of economics? So everything at the moment, not just at the economics level, but the level of developing new businesses, is GDP and growth based. There has been a lot of talk about moves to a circular economy, but how do we get that circularity? And how do we move away from GDP, perhaps more towards the kind of approach that you see in a country like Bhutan? What about anti-greenwashing laws? So the EU, for example, has a sustainable finance disclosure regulation. So some of the laws are being developed to suit this new environment. What about the Aarhus Convention on their compliance committee and the European Parliament? So just last week, the European Parliament said, well, yes, we will make sure that anybody can take a legal action against companies and against governments for failure to comply with environmental standards. So that will open up things and hold people to account. That will all help in terms of making sure that our future planet is as wonderful as it can be. We all talk about a lot about what we own. Maybe we should move away from that and say it's not about the land that we own, but it's about the way that we steward that land when we are in control of that particular area of the planet. And what have we done with it? And how will it look when we pass on? Government needs to focus much more on longer term issues and become more apolitical and work together. We also need to watch out for this clash between technical advances and nature. So Bitcoin, for example, may well give access to finance for many more people. But when you look at Bitcoin and find out that it uses up as much electricity as Argentina or Belgium, for example, there is a bit of a clash there. Maybe we need to have different kinds of cryptocurrency, which are not so hungry when it comes to using the planet's resources. And then we need to support people. So a company called Danone, the CEO was trying to do the right thing by moving towards more sustainability, but was removed by the shareholders because they thought that he hadn't made sufficient profit for them. So perhaps we need to get away from companies' rationale being to provide profit for the shareholders to some other reason for existence. So I think what we need to do is to sit down and think about refocusing our agenda, to refocus our current tools away from our traditional anti-money laundering and anti-financial crime issues, more into an anti-terroricide focus, and develop these new anti-terroricide financing tools and develop them quickly as well. So thank you very much indeed. That was a very quick run through of the issues. And for those of you who the issues I was when I started looking at them in more detail, there are lots and lots of new solutions being dreamt up, which are all quite, the majority of which are quite small scale at the moment. But if we move some of those into larger scale and we ramp those up, we give them the leverage they deserve, and including what we're doing in terms of anti-terroricide financing, I think there is definitely hope. But we do need to think about this, we do need to focus on it, and we do need to move quickly. Thank you very much indeed for your attention. If you want to get in touch, and if you've got more information you think, oh, you didn't cover this, I would be only too delighted to find out. If you violently disagree with certain things that I've mentioned, I'd love to have a discussion. And if you think there's a way in which we can move some of this forward together, and you've got other ideas about how to do that, equally, that would be. So thank you very much indeed, and I hope that has proved helpful and of some interest this morning. Thank you.
Treći govornik, Erik Mantelajers, je rukovodilac razvoja profesionalne prakse i partner u reviziji u RSM Holandija i profesor revizije. Kao viši revizorski partner radi kao eksterni revizor na slučajevima vezanim uglavnom za sektor transporta i logistike. U narednim minutama gospodin Erik će nam se obratiti na temu kontinuirana revizija u funkciji prevencije i detekcije korporativnih prevara i finansijskog kriminala.
Good morning, everybody. Today, I would like to discuss with you and to talk with you about audit technology and audit quality. First of all, I would like to thank the organization for their kind invitation, and above that, I would like to thank Professor Dr. Branko Ljutic as the translator of today. Thank you to all and welcome this morning. Let me introduce myself first. My name is Erik Mantelajers. I'm living in the Netherlands, and over there I am head of the professional practical department of RSM. RSM is an international audit firm with a global connection. In my career, I studied several things. First of all, my PhD, but from my profession, I studied auditing, IT audit, and IT security. As said, I am head of professional practice department and audit partner of RSM. But on the other hand, I am working for knowledge institutions like Maastricht University, Zuid University of Applied Sciences, Nijrode, and sometimes I can be in Suriname for FHR Business School. So I'm combining the work as an external auditor and head of practice on one hand, and on the other hand, I'm working for several universities. What is my message of today? What kind of questions will be answered? As said, who is Eric? You already know. Another important question will be, what are relevant and current audit technologies? So I will focus on technology. On the other hand, I would like to look after the relationship between technology and audit quality on the other hand. And one important element of audit quality is fraud detection. Looking at that, what is our main challenge? When we speak about technology, we will talk about algorithms. And algorithms have to be audited. Who is auditing the algorithms and who is auditing the auditor? So, to wrap up, the main question is, what will be the future of auditing? What will be the future of the auditor? Quality is a very important concept, not only in the Netherlands, not only in your country, it's worldwide. And IFAC, the International Federation of Accountants, is working on standards. And with reference to quality, there are three main standards. ISQM1, International Standard on Quality Management, number 1, ISQM2, and our ISA 220. The first one is about quality on a firm level. The second one is about quality on an engagement level. And the third one is about quality with reference to the audit partner. I prepared a framework. I hope you will see it on my screen. And when we look at the green part of the framework, it's about ISQM1. The brown part, left above, is about ISQM2. And the gray one, under, is ISA, International Standard on Auditing, is about audit quality in relation to the audit partner. And we don't have time enough to discuss all these elements, but I think this chart could be very helpful to everybody who is interested in quality and quality management. Let me discuss a few of these elements. On the bottom line, you will see a red arrow with quality objectives and quality indicators. That's very important at this moment all over the world. Every audit firm has to think about audit quality indicators. How can we measure audit quality? On the other hand, the gray arrow is about culture and professional skepticism. Culture is a soft item, but it's very important. Culture within a firm, within a client, within an environment is very, very, very important. On the left side, there is integrated, iterative, robust, and scalability. We have smaller firms, we have larger firms, we have international firms, we have local firms, and all those rules about quality are scalable. Looking into the chart, on the right side, we will see quality risks. So we are thinking about what could go wrong. And after that, what can we do to monitor and remediation process? Do we accept clients? And as we do so, what kind of engagement letter we will have? So looking at this chart, we see all elements on a firm level, on an engagement level, and on a partner level of quality. We see audit objectives, quality objectives, and we see risks. And special for today, one of the risks could be fraud. So as an auditor, as an external auditor, we have to cope with fraud risks. And that's the relationship from audit quality, audit technology, and especially risks. But our umbrella will be audit quality, and I will show one of the definitions of audit quality on my next sheet. One important definition of audit quality is the definition of D'Angelo, 1981. They say audit quality is a probability that an auditor will both discover and report a breach in the client's accounting system. So discovering is one, but having the guts to share it with client or with those charged with governance is the second one, very important. So doing both is a good definition of audit quality. Audit quality is very important. I already shared with you that IFAC has 3 standards. In England, UK, there is the Bryden report. It's the 3rd one on this sheet. In the Netherlands, we have several other reports, the CTA report, the MCA report, our Minister of Finance is coping with audit quality. But internationally, everyone and every audit firm and audit organization is dealing with audit quality. 2 main elements of audit quality are, on the first hand, continuity. So, I mean, going concern assessment. And the other one, more important for today, is fraud, corruption, and integrity. The first report, CTA report, our report from our government in the Netherlands, there is one important recommendation. Recommendation of our committee sounds as follows. The committee recommends that the statutory audits should pay more attention to aspects of financial fraud, continuity, and disruption. They make a combination of that. when auditing medium and large entities, they say, standard forensic expertise should be present in the audit team. So me as an external auditor, my team, I should add standard, a forensic expert. They give a recommendation, more attention should also be paid to these subjects in our permanent education as an auditor. Okay, that's the recommendation. That's our goal, to cope with fraud. How can we do that? We should use audit technology. Audit technology, and a reference to July 2017. She is a colleague of Professor Miklos Vazaheli. She presented this timeline, the timeline of the use of audit-oriented technologies in the early 70s, starting with a pencil and a calculator, and all over the time, in the end, nowadays, we use drones. We use blockchain. We use audit apps. We use Internet of Things. We use data analytics. We use text mining. And I will explain it later in my presentation. But this is, I think, it's a good timeline with a specification of audit technologies over time. This is a timeline I used from her dissertation. Another framework out of her dissertation is this framework. I hope you can read it, I hope you can see it, but there are, I think, 6 or 7 important elements of technology. Let me start with the assertion. So we as an auditor, we have a certain assertion when we start. One can be completeness or accuracy or something like a transaction related or account balance related. But don't forget, it also can be fraud related. You can read it. In what stages can we apply such a technology? It can be in the planning, it can be in the test of control or the substantive tests. It can be during the test of the detailed balances, or in the end at the completion. Earlier in my framework I prepared for you, I was talking about risk analysis. And risk can be of a certain level, low, medium, or high. Using those audit technology, we are using data. And most logical is the financial data, but don't forget the non-financial data, the data inside the company, but don't forget the exogenous data, the data from outside, the public data, and especially the combination of financial data, non-financial data, internal data, and external data. That is the most positive combination. When we are auditing, who will be our user? First of all, external auditor, myself, an internal auditor, or as discussed earlier, the fraud specialist. Let me have a look at the business cycle. when we are auditing, we will talk about sales and collection, acquisition and payment, inventory or whatever. And in the end, maybe the same as the previous timeline, what kind of techniques we can use to detect fraud, to prevent fraud. Data mining, machine learning, classification algorithms, data matching, trend analysis, queries, dashboarding. So this is a good summarization used from Hyundai to explore 7 elements of audit technology. One of these technologies is blockchain. 2 years ago, we were doing some research about blockchain. It was a combination of my good friend Martijn Zoet and Koen Smit. Nowadays, currently I'm working with Martijn and myself. We both are professors of applied sciences. Martijn, data analytics, and myself as an auditor. And we are researching the impact of blockchain on the auditor's audit approach. Whoever is interested, please let me know. I'm very happy to share this research with you. Blockchain is a relatively modern technology, much more older. 1938 is Benford's law. I hope and I think you know Benford's law. And Benford's law, you can read it, says it's more logical that you find figures starting with a 1 than we'll find with a 9. Starting with a 2 will much more occur than with 3, than with a 4, and so on and so on. So if you get a data set with other figures, maybe it's corrupted, maybe there is fraud. And if so, you have to investigate it. Benford's law is a way of data analytics you can use to detect fraud. What is another technology we actually use with reference to auditing, audit quality, and fraud detection? It is scraping. Please remember this name, this technique. It's very important. Scraping, I hope you feel what it could be. We go to websites, we scrape the news, we collect the data, and we analyze it. And now we are scraping the news. So every week, every Monday, every Wednesday, we present a newsletter for audit firms. But the technology we use, scraping, we can use it for other things. We can use it to detect fraud and to report about fraud. We can report in the form of a kind of a word cloud. So when we create our weekly newsletter, Accountants Weekly, we create every Monday and every Wednesday, we create a word cloud. But remember, we could do so with reference to fraud detection. So if you are interested in our scraping and or our newsletter, go to Accountants Weekly, leave your email address, and you will be fully up to date every week. So that's scraping. Please remember that is very important. Another technology is text mining. What we are doing is another example of scraping. It's scraping of, like, for example, PDFs. We use texts. We go to minutes of a board. We go with our computer through those texts, and we try to detect fraud. Text mining is used to scrape annual reports, websites, or other documents. And with current techniques, we can find and we can detect fraud. Okay, one of the goals of today was who is auditing the algorithms and who is auditing the auditor. Very important is the concept singularity. Singularity is the future creation of a super intelligent machine. A machine that is creating and improving itself. So nowadays, we as a human are creating algorithms. In future, and it's happening today, machines are improving algorithms. But tomorrow, we as a human don't understand the improvement. So what is the possibility to understand the creation of algorithms? That's a very important challenge. What's our spot on the horizon? Very important from my perspective as a professor of applied sciences is automating the auditor. The auditor started 100 years ago with a pencil checking everything. But nowadays we have algorithms, we have singularity, we have specific technologies. Who is understanding that and who is auditing those technologies and who is auditing the auditor? Very important from my view of this stuff is the continuum paradigm. Continuum paradigm exists of 4 elements: continuous reporting, continuous monitoring, continuous auditing, and continuous assurance. So normally, our clients are reporting once a year with an annual report. But a bank or the environment expects more frequent reporting. We call it continuous reporting. If so, this reporting has to be assured, has to be audited, and has to be monitored. That's very important. Continuous reporting, monitoring, auditing, and assurance. And these elements, in my opinion, are very important for the content of the future of auditing. Do you want to discuss the future of auditing with reference to fraud detection? I'm very happy to share it with you. And in my opinion, it should be the continuum paradigm using very important technologies. To come there and to reach that, we have some current research projects. My main project I do together with Professor Martijn Zoet, the Zuid University of Applied Sciences in the Netherlands. What are we doing? We are building up continuous auditing projects, scraping, don't forget that word, scraping projects, and creating the future of auditing. Within my firm, RSM, in a combination with Zuid University of Applied Sciences, we are training algorithms with reference to going concern, continuity. We are building up soft controls algorithms. We are working on projects of combined assurance. Together with Nijrode Business University in the Netherlands, we are analyzing data to measure audit quality. And with my good friend, Professor Miklos Vazaheli from the US, we are working on a project of data analytics, especially outlier detection. And all those projects are very relevant and very important to create the auditor of the future. All my knowledge, all my information, all my data, I create on a regular basis some YouTube videos. I have a channel, a YouTube channel, and we already have more than 550,000 views. If you are interested, go to our channel. It's not a channel, it's a channel. And you will find in the Dutch language, but you can use the translation. And I hope you will enjoy it. And please send a reaction to me or discuss it with me or whatever. Are you interested in other knowledge we build up? I invite you to go to my dissertation with the title, An Evaluation of Technologies to Improve Auditing. And there is a relationship, there is a main relationship with fraud, integrity, and corruption. If, and I would really appreciate that, if you want to give a reaction, or if you don't agree, or if you have a question, or whatever, please send an email to me. In yellow, you already see my email address. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on YouTube. I really would appreciate an interaction with you, a connection with you, and maybe I would like to have a research project or a combination of my university, your firm, my firm, whatever. I am very interested to work together internationally, and to do so, please find me by email. Before ending, I would like to thank you, everybody, to be here, to listen to me, and first of all, the organization for having me here, thank you. And most important, Professor Branco, thank you for helping me, introducing me, and translating my English. Thank you all. Have a good and very interesting conference. And after this conference, I hope to be live next time with you. Thank you.
Evo, došli smo do kraja prve sesije. Još jednom veliko hvala od srca našim Keynote govornicima konferencije prve iz oblasti forenzičnog računovodstva. pod nazivom Trendovi, izazovi u borbi protiv prevara i privrednog kriminala. Za sve registrovane učesnike ove konferencije ćemo obezbijediti link putem e-maila, link svih ovih prezentacija, obzirom da smo imali male poteškoće. Dakle, sve prezentacije ćemo vam poslati na mail, a svi oni koji nisu bili u prilici danas da nam se pridruže na konferenciji će imati priliku da pogledaju snimke prezentacija na web stranici konferencije. Sada slijedi pauza. Po agendi naredna sesija počinje u 11 sati i 45 minuta, tako da evo, molim vas da svi budemo online u to vrijeme. Hvala vam svima još jednom.